Meowed everyone, I'm Asti Spumani, and today we're making what I like to call a raid tier dish, the authentic pumpkin pastry platter. Why is it raid tier? Well, this dish consists of many parts and also can absolutely feed an 8-man raid. If you're wanting to make this yourself, it will take an entire day, although you can split the work between 2 days. It'll also use every dish and cooking utensil in your kitchen. Let's talk a little bit about this dessert, or should I say these 8 desserts. According to the item description, each of these pastries is pumpkin flavored except for the pumpkin shaped ones. And then on Mog Station, we get a little more info, that the pumpkin shaped one is possibly chocolate. I also take there might be chocolate as the A-OK to use candy melts, which will make life immensely easier. Let's get cooking! First up, a little bit of chocolate work. There's multiple stages of chocolate work in this dish. You can use real chocolate for everything, but all this is primarily decorative, so taste isn't the primary concern, and tempering 5 batches of chocolate, well, that's no fun. So melt up your chocolate and pipe out the batwing shape. Next, coat your orb molds. You'll need 2 per bat, but I suggest making spares of all of your chocolate work in case something breaks. Now coat your pumpkin mold in chocolate. You want to go thinner than I did here, but still well coated. Also, if you're unable to find orange luster dust or really dislike chocolate flavored candy melts, you can use plain orange candy melts, which are a more palatable vanilla flavor. And if you can't find orange candy melts, you can mix 3 to 4 yellow candy melts to 1 red candy melt to make orange. Now melt a few black candy melts, throw them in a piping bag, and pipe the line of the tombstone. Use the leftover black candy melt, add in some white candy melts, and mix to make a gray, then pipe the rest of the tombstone. Then set them aside to harden. It'll take a few hours. Now let's get started on the marshmallows. What's that? You didn't see any marshmallows in the image? In place of the ice cream, I'm making marshmallows. They'll hold up better over time, and I'm a sucker for marshmallows. First, we'll need to color some coconut. You'll need green and pink. I'm doing each in a small ramekin so I can easily indent an ice cream shape for a one-time mold. It does waste a bit of coconut, but doing this in a small container minimizes it. Now for the ghost topper. Mix 1 part powdered sugar and 1 part cornstarch together and press into a hilled ghost shape. Set those aside while we make the actual marshmallow. I'm just using Alton Brown's basic recipe here. Mix together your gelatin and water, then set aside. Then put the rest of the water, sugar, and corn syrup in a pan, give it a quick stir, then put it on the stove. Once it's on the stove, no stirring. You want to take it off just under caramel, so a good amount of bubbles, but no color or just barely color. Pour it into a large mixing bowl, add your gelatin, and then get to beating it. Once it's light and fluffy and has tracks, add your flavoring. You can use vanilla or, if you can find it, pumpkin spice flavoring. Once you get noticeably stiff tracks, transfer it to a piping bag, then pipe it into your coconut and sugar molds. Then set them aside to cure. Ideally, you can make these the day before, but even just 6 hours is enough for the flavor to become palatable. Okay, onto the pudding. Throw your sugar, flour, spices, and salt into a pan, then give it a quick whisk to break up the lumps. Then add about half to 2/3 the half and half and whisk. Add your pumpkin, then put it on the stove. While that's heating, mix the yolk into the remaining half and half. Now mix a bit of the hot pumpkin mixture into the egg to temper it, then combine the two in the pot, whisking the whole time. Once combined, place it back on the stove for a minute or 2, just until it's steaming. Now, strain to remove any lumps. This is a bit slow, but it's super important for a good silky pudding. Then, ladle the pudding into your cauldron ramekins. Don't forget to wipe up any spilled pudding, then put them in the fridge. This is a naturally thick pudding, so it sets up really quick. Now for the cookie topper for the pudding. I'm using leftover ginger mage dough that I had in the freezer. Roll it nice and super thin. Now, break off a small portion of the dough and mix in a bit of cocoa powder to color it. I'm using part of a Linzer cookie set to cut out the small pumpkins, bats, cats, and ghosts. Now press small bits of the chocolate dough in to make the faces and transfer them to a baking sheet. I also put faces on some of the ghosts. You want to pop those into the fridge, then preheat your oven. You don't want them frozen solid, just well chilled. Bake about 5 to 7 minutes. They're thin and small, so they'll bake quick. Then put them aside. Now let's make some cake. We'll start by whipping the egg whites. I'm using the King Arthur pumpkin roll cake recipe, plus the extra egg white from the pudding, so as not to waste it. I'll be using this cake batter for all 3 of our cake elements, the roll cake, cupcake, and cake slice. Once the egg whites are at soft peaks, add in a little of the sugar to stabilize it, then whip to stiff peaks. Now, in a large bowl, mix your flour, spices, salt, baking powder, and sugar together to get out the lumps. Now, if you're a smarter lizard than me, you'll mix the yolks and pumpkin together first, rather than adding them individually. If you do mess up like me, it still comes out fine, it just needs more stirring. Once well combined, fold in 1/3 of your egg whites. Then, fold in the rest of your egg whites. Spoon a small amount of batter into mini cupcake liners in a mini muffin pan. You want them about half full. Now for the roll and sheet cake. Line a baking tray with parchment paper, then pour the batter in. Smooth it as thin as you can. If it doesn't reach the edges entirely, that's fine. It's a stiff batter, so it stays where you put it. I'll also be using this for layering for the slice, since I couldn't find my square cake pan. Bake it until it's done in the middle. For the roll cake, immediately after removing the sheet cake from the oven, cut off a long rectangle and peel it off the parchment. Sandwich the warm cake in parchment, and then gently but tightly roll it up. Then place it aside to fully cool. Now, onto the real centerpiece of our pumpkin platter, the nut pumpkin tart. I'm making a chocolate variation of the now not-so-secret Spumoni family pie crust. Mix together your flour, cocoa powder, and salt. Then cut in your shortening. Theoretically, you should use a dough blender, but a sturdy fork works just fine. Once the shortening is in, mix in your sugar. Now mix together your egg, water, and vinegar. Then mix your wets and your dries. If it's too loose or wet, then add more flour. You'll want to knead it a bit too. Then roll it out between 2 sheets of parchment and chill. Make an indent with your pan to get the general size, then cut out the dough. Chill the dough again, then shove it into your parchment-lined pan or dish. It'll fight you, but fold the excess inwards, cut it off, and then press down. You can use the excess to patch holes. It's a pretty forgiving crust. Now start cutting a mountain pattern into the side wall. Make sure the lowest point of the crown is no shorter than 1 inch from the bottom. A tart needs to be able to hold a filling after all. Here I'm measuring how wide I need to make the internal stand for the pumpkin. This cookie cutter is thankfully the right size. Roll out some of the excess crust, then cut it into a strip. Place the cookie cutter in the center, then form the strip of dough around it. Then remove the cutter and press the dough together. Double check it's still about the right size, then chill the dough. Once chilled, line with parchment, then fill with your pie weight of choice. I only had rice laying around, but it still works. You'll then blind bake it until it's solid. For me, that was about 20 to 25 minutes. Okay, now for more chocolate work. Melt some more, then pop out your bat parts. Delicately dip the spheres into the chocolate, then press onto the wings. I'm wearing a glove here to help block the heat of my hand from melting the chocolate. Now, while the first parts of the bats are cooling, pop out your pumpkins, put them back in the mold, then fill them with cherry compote. Then, seal the filling into the pumpkin with a layer of chocolate. The first parts of the bat should be set up enough to put on the back of the bat now. If you're wondering why I left part of the sphere uncovered when piping them, it's so they stand up easily, like here. If you're splitting this dessert raid's work across 2 phases, this would be the ideal stopping point of the night. You're about 70% done. Otherwise, I'd suggest a dinner break. For the next round of chocolate, first you'll need to delicately free the pumpkins. You may need to trim some excess chocolate off as well. Then mix together your orange luster dust with some vodka and get to painting. You'll want it fairly thick and you may have to do 2 coats. Now set those aside to dry. We did marshmallow earlier, so let's play with molten sugar some more and make caramel. Caramel apples, that is. Remove the stems and shove sticks in your apples, then place them aside. I'm doing the apple for the choco apple as well. Then place your sugar and just enough water to moisten it into a saucepan, give it a quick stir, then put it on the stove. Then don't touch it at all. I know it's so tough, but don't touch it until it's a pretty golden color. At which point, remove it from heat, then stir in your butter. It'll look angry, but that's just how caramel is. If you want a softer caramel, use heavy cream instead of butter. Once it calms down, stick in your apple and scoop the caramel over it until it's covered. Then place it on parchment to cool, cutting away the excess. In a large bowl, mix butter and cream cheese together. It'll be tough to do at first, but keep going. Once combined, add your powdered sugar and either vanilla or pumpkin spice flavoring and mix. I prefer vanilla here since it's going on pumpkin spice cake. There, isn't that some pretty frosting? Now set it in the fridge to chill. Now for the final bit of chocolate work. Pipe some appropriately sized jack-o'-lantern faces onto parchment, letting them rest for a bit, and then stick them on ever so lightly onto your pumpkin. Don't press it down too much. Use the last of the chocolate to cover the second apple. I'm also using it to keep the paper straw on. The straw is cuter than just a stick, isn't it? And it's all assembly from here. First, peel the parchment off the roll cake. Then, frost the inside of it and set it on your platter. Next, frost and stack 3 layers of cake, then trim it into a cake slice. Top it with some more frosting and then set it on your platter. Divide your remaining frosting in 2. Then add green, then yellow dye to one of them. And using a star tip, pipe frosting onto the cupcake. Mix cocoa powder into the last of your frosting. Then pipe it with a star tip onto your roll cake. Add a broken in half pirouette cookie, then your tiny Springer Lay cookies on top of your pudding. Fill your chocolate tart shell with cherry compote. Then top the cake slice with cherries as well. Place the pumpkin on the tart. And stick the eye back on if needed. Stick the bat on top. Then put the apples on the platter, followed by the cupcake. Stick the tombstone and a candy corn pumpkin on top of the cupcake. Now to assemble the marshmallow cone. Stick the cone into the bottom of the green marshmallow. Then place the pink one. I'm using a skewer here to help it stand up. Tap the sugar off the ghost, then top the cone with it. Use a little bit of chocolate frosting to make the face. And then place it on the platter. Right before serving, add the whipped cream to the tart. I found a pumpkin spice whipped cream, which is just perfect for this. And that's it! Your very own pumpkin pastry platter, perfect for a raucous raid party. You could make these full size if you use a bigger platter, but each of these are sized to better serve 1 to 2 people each. My favorite was definitely the pudding. I hope you have a merry All Saints wake and enjoy this treat rather than a trick.